Hello everyone. Now we have completed the detail about the different metabolism of the carbohydrate, proteins, the fatty acids, and other various metabolism and their diseases. We have discussed all that topics in detail. Now, today in this video, I am going to describe you about the overview of the integration of metabolic pathways of the energy metabolism. So the overview of the interrelationship between the important metabolic pathways concerned with the fuel metabolism is given in this picture. You can see in this picture. So I have described briefly about the integration of the metabolic pathway of the energy metabolism in this video. So for detailed information of this metabolic pathway, you should refer to the respective chapters and the respective video for glycogenesis, for glycogenolysis, glycolysis, gluconeogenesis, and citric acid cycle. All this topic I have covered independently. So for the detailed information, I advised you to read those topic independently. So first of all, we have the glucose molecule. The glucose is converted into the glucose can be converted to the glucose 6-phosphate, and glucose 6-phosphate is the central molecule for the carbohydrate metabolism. So from the conversion of the glucose 6-phosphate to pyruvate, it is called the glycolysis. So the degradation of the glucose to pyruvate is known as the glycolysis. And now we have the molecule pyruvate. So from the pyruvate also we can convert pyruvate to glucose 6-phosphate and eventually glucose 6-phosphate to glucose. So we call this process as gluconeogenesis. So the gluconeogenesis is the formation of the glucose from the non-carbohydrate source. That means from the pyruvate glucose is formed. And from the glucose 6-phosphate also the glycogen can be formed. So this is known as the glycogenesis. And from the glycogen, if glucose 6-phosphate is formed and eventually it is formed at glucose and can be utilized in other various metabolism, then it is known as the glycogenolysis. So let's see here. The glucose 6-phosphate is the central molecule of the carbohydrate metabolism. That means from the glucose 6-phosphate is formed, and from the glucose 6-phosphate the pyruvate is formed. The conversion of the glucose 6-phosphate to pyruvate is known as glycolysis, and the conversion of the pyruvate to glucose 6-phosphate is known as gluconeogenesis, and the conversion of the glucose 6-phosphate to glycogen is known as glycogenesis, and the conversion of the glycogen to glucose 6-phosphate is known as glycogenolysis. Now glucose 6-phosphate also enters the hexose monophosphate shunt. So we have this hexose monophosphate shunt also. So from this hexose monophosphate shunt we acquired the NADPH, which can eventually be used in the fatty acid synthesis. I will discuss that in short minute. So we have pyruvate. So this pyruvate can be converted into acetyl coenzyme. In this acetyl coenzyme enters into the number of metabolism. This acetyl coenzyme enters into the citric acid cycle. So from the citric acid cycle, NADH and FADH2 is acquired, and this NADH and FADH2 enters into the oxidative phosphorylation, thereby creating an ATP. So we have ketogenic amino acid and glucogenic amino acid. The ketogenic amino acid also can be converted into acetyl coenzyme, and that can be entered in the citric acid cycle. Also glucogenic amino acid directly enters citric acid cycle to produce the NADH and FADH2. Also the glucogenic amino acid can be converted to pyruvate, and from the pyruvate it can enter the other metabolism. So now we have triacyl glycerol. From the triacyl glycerol there could be the synthesis of the fatty acid, and from the fatty acid through the beta oxidation, the NADH and FADH2 is acquired. So it enters the oxidative phosphorylation. NADH and FADH2 enters the oxidative phosphorylation, thereby creating an ATP. Also the fatty acid can also be converted to acetyl coenzyme, which can enter the citric acid cycle and eventually creating NADH and FADH2 and ultimately creating an ATP. So also the acetyl coenzyme A and the NADPH which have been produced from the HMP salt, along with the NADPH and acetyl coenzyme A, it can enters into the fatty acid synthesis, and ultimately fatty acid can be produced. So this is the integration of the metabolic pathway of the energy metabolism. So this is how the various metabolism are integrated. So I also request you to read individual metabolism about glycogenesis, gluconeogenesis, glycogenolysis, glycolysis, HMP citric acid cycle, the ketogenesis, the beta oxidation, the fatty acid synthesis. Also, I request you to read about the oxidative phosphorylation. So I hope you understood this topic of an overview of integration of metabolic pathway of energy metabolism. So this concludes our lecture. Thank you.